Is UU member Matthew Christen. Matthew holds several degrees in education, school leadership, and educational psychology. He is involved in advocacy for the community, especially in the area of transportation. As a lifelong learner, Matthew states that he continues to seek out and broaden awareness by staying awake. I'd like to invite Matthew up to give us a talk on jazz and the social conscience.
Jazz. The first thing that comes to mind is not necessarily social justice. For me, the first time I learned about jazz, actually one of the first concerts I ever went to was Dave Brubeck and his quartet. What I didn't know then, but I learned later on, was that Dave Brubeck was one of the first jazz artists that canceled over 25 of his shows because he had a member in his band who was black and was not allowed to come in to the venues, and in some cases not the same way, or to stay in the same places, and so in the South. So today is a little bit about jazz and perhaps a little bit about the appreciation, to get to know the music a little bit. Unfortunately, it's at the bottom. Less than 1% of our listening in this country pertains to jazz. It's down at the bottom along with world music, and unfortunately, but so it's not as popular. But in our experience today, I just want to give you a little taste and a little bit of recognition to the role it plays in the world of social justice. So jazz at its roots has the social and historical context of being a language that was generated by enslaved Africans in the Deep South. And it was a communication and fostering communication in a rather ironic way, because at that time it was a language that was coded and known as signifying. In other words, they would be able to communicate in front of the masters and white people without them knowing what they were really talking about. And so in this way, jazz as a form, both language and sound, really had its roots. And they didn't really become a commercial venue until blacks started to play for white audiences, especially in New Orleans, which has kind of given the traditional start of jazz in our country. So, in that language was the communication about the struggles with both things like voting rights, the ability to, it all came out really during the time of the, I'm sorry, I damaged my knee this week, so I'm having cards because I had been on some pain medication. So, at any rate, so jazz emerged during the Jim Crow era, right, where voting rights were being stripped. The exploitation of labor was immense by sharecropping. And so this language and rhythm, and we got cut off just a little bit, but in Charlie Mingus's piece, and he's known as the angry black man in the jazz world, but that was written back in the early 60s. And if you note, there's a character of the rhythm, and that's what jazz is really known for, is syncopation, rhythm, and the ability to reflect the world in so many different ways. And so for Charlie Mingus's piece, Freedom, he was able to mirror that labor, that continuous movement with the beat of the rhythm. And it would get wild in some cases. Now, the big difference between listening was that when it first came about, it was much more of a dance arrangement type of music. Today it's kind of moved more into the listening phase. But so we want to listen to a few pieces that will help us to understand a little bit of the evolutionary journey. It's compelling music. It's emotive voice for civil rights, racial equity, and broader social justice causes. Was born out of the fact that musicians such as Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Nina Simone, Billie Holiday began to use their platform to try and stir our country, our people, and our consciousness towards a more equitable world, and dealing with that. Keeping in mind that these people quite often, in order to do that, risk their entire livelihood, their lives, and we'll see that in one of the songs for sure. So the first one we'd like to listen to is a song some of you may be familiar with and may not, but it is Strange Fruits by Billie Holiday. So this song was first recorded in 1939, and it was based on a poem written by a Jewish teacher, a white Jewish teacher named Abel Maripol in 1937. Many of us tend to think of the Deep South as the root of the Ku Klux Klan and a lot of lynchings, but actually Ku Klux Klan started in central Indiana. And the double lynching that inspired this poem took place in Indiana in 1930. But keep in mind, as a result of this recording and singing this song live, Billie Holiday was ruthlessly attacked by the federal government. She was stripped of her cabaret license. As a matter of fact, at her death, which was complicated by her drug use stemming from the violence in her childhood, was exacerbated by the feds actually chaining her to her bed and having the doctors and nurses deny her medical care as a result of singing this song. Understanding partly that the music was significant in so many different ways. This next song is sung by Ethel Waters. It was made famous and was written by Fats Waller. Louis Armstrong made the song a bit more famous. We're going to hear it sung by Ethel Waters, called "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue?" So the line in that song you just heard, "My skin is my only sin," is what made this song that much more paid attention to by the world. Actually, it was interesting because the original was written by a kind of a lament that from a black woman whose skin was darker than another woman's, and so it seemed like the guys always went for the lighter skin. Even when you're black, it's a problem. So one of the things to notice in this song and the next one is the kind of the metaphor between, or irony. So if you notice, the rhythm and the instrumentation was fairly upbeat, while the words were pretty downbeat. So, you have that interesting contrast that you could dance to some of this music and at the same time listen to the tragedy of it. This next song is, excuse a little bit of the language, but was certainly apropos for this topic, and it was a very popular song. And I'll talk a little bit about it more after we're done, but this is Mississippi Goddamn by Nina Simone. This came out in 1963, and it was written in response to the murder of Medgar Evers. in 1963, and also in response to the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Alabama, where 4 young girls, black girls, were killed. She weaponized the music by voicing all of this and voicing the anguish in the concern that so many acts of violence and oppression against the black communities in the segregated South, and that the response from the white community was go slow, and take it slow, and it reflected the painfully slow pace of change. As a matter of fact, the perpetrators of the church bombing didn't face any conviction, and for 14 years, the first one, one of the 4 that committed the crime actually died before they were convicted. One was 38 years after the fact was convicted, and so keeping in mind what's too slow, right? Jazz protest is very much alive today in songs like Breathless, written by trumpeter Terence Blanchard, and that was in response to the death of Eric Garner. If you haven't heard of Kamasi Washington, Kamasi Washington is a contemporary jazz artist at the moment, and his music covers so much. It's being introduced in churches as uplifting, spiritual kind of themes and responses, all the way to more protests in, if you want to listen, an album of his called The Epic is worth it. The first line of Charles Mingus's most famous song was called Fables of Phoebus. Phoebus was a political leader in the South, and he wrote in response, "Oh Lord, don't let 'em shoot us." And yet, almost 70 years after Mingus wrote those words to protest Orville Phobos and is mobilizing troops to stop school segregation in Louisiana, that same spirit still continues to speak out against police brutality today, where people are still in the mind, "Oh Lord, don't let them shoot us." With that, we'll have another song to close out today that was written and performed in honor of this music touches the world. Actually, India made it more popular than it was in the U.S. back in the early half of the 20th century. And so it is in other parts of the world also. So with that, I encourage you to take a moment, add a little bit of jazz, but also to check out some of the music that is still being written to help against social injustices that are still being wrought today.